Good morning. This webinar offers closed captioning. To enable closed captioning, click on the live transcript button on the bottom of your screen and choose your preferred method. Welcome to the Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection webinar. Please note, any website or email that I mentioned will be posted in the chat for those seeking business license assistance. You can visit the Small Business Center here at City Hall or call 312-74-GO-BIZ. Business license can be applied for or renewed online at chicagobusinessdirect.org. If you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, you get credit for joining this webinar by sending an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. To learn more about this program, please visit chicago.gov/business education. This webinar is being recorded and will be available at youtube.com/Chicago BACP. We would like to encourage all attendees to ask questions. Please use the chat box to send your questions. There will be a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. Please note the views, information, and opinions expressed during this webinar are solely those of the presenter and do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection or the City of Chicago. At this time, I will now turn this webinar over to Sandra for us to begin.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Excited to share with you some information about the most important piece of business information that you're going to need when you open up your business, which is insurance. So I'm going to start by just giving you a little bit of background about myself. Let me just make sure I can get this screen going. There we go. Okay, so I've been an agency owner since 1997, so coming up on 26 years. I have 3 offices all in the Chicagoland area, and I'm also licensed in several other states. We specialize in commercial insurance, wealth protection, retirement planning, everything that a business owner needs to understand, as well as all the personal lines insurance. Farmers Insurance has been around since 1928, so we're a very big company. But today's presentation is really to give you information, not to solicit or anything, but just to basically consider me as a resource should you have information as you proceed in your business ventures. So we'll start with saying what is business insurance? Any kind of insurance is you're buying insurance to protect risk. So it's a risk management tool. What we want to do with insurance is we want to be able to transfer the risk to the insurance company, pay a premium, and then our losses are limited to my deductible and what the policy coverages that I purchased. So every small business needs to protect against certain basic things like fire, theft, liability claims, lawsuits, slips and falls, death or disability of a key person. So that business owner is typically the brains of the operation and also the sweat equity, so to speak. So if something happens to that business owner, who's going to provide or ensure that business continues? And you buy that through insurance. So a lot of people ask me, when do I need to buy business insurance? So whenever there's a couple triggers of when you need to buy insurance. Number one, when you enter into a lease with somebody, so you're purchasing space or renting space. And even if you're not open yet for business, once you sign that lease, it requires you to maintain certain types of insurance that we'll go through. So when you enter into a lease or when you transact a business for a service or a business for a product, that enters into the risk and the need of needing insurance that you could be potentially sued for. Workers' compensation laws are required in the state of Illinois that if you have employees, you need to carry workers' compensation insurance. We'll go into who is considered an employee down the road here with our meeting. So what's the importance of business insurance? I always say, anytime you deal with insurance and your healthcare, you always want to go with the best, because one is going to protect you financially if there's a disaster, and another one's going to maybe save your life. So in both instances, these are the 2 times you don't want to be frugal or cheap about insurance or healthcare. So keep that in mind when you're shopping for business insurance, because we protect your livelihood. We can protect your family. We make sure that if your operation suffers a loss, that we've got the money and the means to pay for all of those things to get your life back in order. It reduces risk, it transfers risks. Another thing about insurance is that when you're buying insurance, premiums towards your taxes are deductible. It's considered a reasonable tax expense. So whenever you're spending money on any type of insurance product in your business, think of it that you're getting a 30% break on the cost, because you're going to write that off on your insurance on your tax returns. So they are tax deductible. And leading into right there, yes, of course they're tax deductible. The IRS rule says that in order for something to be tax deductible, it has to be ordinary and necessary. So you can't, just buy policies that don't match your need, or just because you think you're going to get a tax break. It does have to be reasonable and ordinary, and it has to be appropriate for your business. So keeping that in mind, obviously consult a tax accountant when you're working on questions like this. So here's some of the products to consider when you're looking for business insurance. A lot of people just think of liability insurance as what they need. I'm opening a business, I need liability insurance. That's kind of foundational. But here are some of the other products that many business owners need, but don't understand it, or fail to give advice on it, or just from a price perspective chose to self-insure. But so there's business auto, commercial auto, partnership life insurance, general liability, crime, professional liability, and you can see everything on the screen, cyber. We're going to touch on most of these coverages and explain what they mean. Take notes, write your questions down, because one coverage may not be pertinent to a certain industry. So you want to make sure to ask your questions according to what you're looking for. Okay, so what's the difference between a business auto policy and a personal auto policy? Let's say you have a Honda Civic. So it's you bought it personally, but that Honda Civic is used for your business operations. Do I write it on my business policy, or do I write it on a personal auto policy? So in that scenario, the question is going to be are you driving just to and from work, or are you going to be using that vehicle and picking up supplies and then delivering things and then going from site to site? Those are triggers or definitions in the personal auto policy that could be excluded. If you do that with your personal auto and you get in an accident, there's certain exclusions for certain business operations. So you want to make sure you ask your auto provider if you're covered to do this, and this in your business operations. If you have your employees drive your vehicles, you definitely cannot have a personal auto policy for that. So there's definitely some loopholes and exclusions on that. Which policy is less expensive? Your personal auto policy is going to be less expensive. The business auto policy provides you a wider range of coverage, a broader coverage. It includes things like deliveries and letting employees drive the vehicle, et cetera. So you do want to be really careful with this, because we get a lot of clients and claims that are declined because they're of the business usage. If you drive for Uber or Lyft and it's a type of business, you can add that certain coverage on your personal auto policy and have coverage extended there. So you wouldn't need a business policy in certain situations. So the best advice on that is just discuss it with your auto insurance carrier and make sure that their policy includes it. Can you buy an endorsement to add the coverage, or do I need commercial insurance business auto policy? So both products are very different from each other. The main coverage on a business policy is this last bullet point, which is called hired and non-owned auto liability. Extremely important. If you have a business and you have an employee or a 1099 contractor, they're still employees, and you ask your employee to drive their car to run an errand, go to the bank, go pick up tomatoes for the restaurant, help me do something. If you do that and they drive their car for you, even though it's their personal car, that transaction that just happened is considered a business auto portion. That's not on their personal auto policy. When you add this coverage called hired and non-owned auto to your business policy, that situation that I just explained would extend coverage to your employees' personal auto policy because they worked for you in that 5-mile scenario or whatever it was, and they got in an accident, they hurt somebody, your insurance would then respond. You would have that coverage. You cannot get hired and non-owned on a personal auto policy. So just again, being careful of I started a small business 25 years ago, I had one employee, and you need help sometimes. Sometimes you have to ask somebody to help do an errand for you. And it just so happens that's the one time that an accident happens. I'll share one story with you on hired and non-owned coverage that happened to one of my clients. It was a real estate company, and they sent their telephone, the receptionist, they were running short on time. So they asked the receptionist to go and drop off open house signs to, the open house that they were doing, not normally his job. Normally the agent does it, but they needed help. So they asked him to do it while he was driving. He crossed over train tracks, and the train track was coming down, caused a very serious accident with fatality. And Century 21 was sued in that situation because he was acting on behalf of the Century 21 company. So it's really a scary coverage not to have when you have people that may be doing an errand for you. Well, it wasn't the company car. It was just for a one-off situation, but that's the time that the coverage needed to be there. Okay, we're going to continue on. So business life insurance. A lot of people most people know what life insurance is. Obviously, we had it at our jobs. It protects if something happens to you. There's money that gets passed along to your families, to your children, so they can continue life in your absence. But a really important coverage for a business owner is business life insurance, also known as Key Life, and that's a policy that you buy with the intention that you may need this to be collateral for a loan. It helps retain key employees. So when I step and explain this collateral for a loan. So let's say you want to expand your business, or you're opening a business and you need a $250,000 line of credit, and you're a qualified client for, let's say, Chase Bank. And everything looks good, except maybe you're a little short on something, maybe something's off with the credit. If you present that you have a business life policy, Key Life policy for that $250,000 loan, then we collateralize that. So it's basically collateral on your behalf, and the bank becomes the beneficiary in that until that loan is paid off. So they're more likely to approve your loan, or sometimes there are stipulations where they won't approve it unless you have this insurance. So if you're healthy enough to get a life policy, consider that to be a nice collateral on your asset side when you're looking for extending credit or retaining key employees. We buy a lot of policies for, let's say, a head chef in a restaurant. That head chef is basically, they're the ones that are bringing in the revenue because it's their recipes, it's their vision in the kitchen. If something happened to that key chef, then it may take the owner of that restaurant 2 or 3 years to replace him. They may have to spend money on multiple employees to replace that key person. So it's a way to retain key employees and also allow the business to continue on should somebody not be around to continue on for you. You can use it as they call it golden handcuffs, but you can use the cash value in a life policy to help your employees with bonuses. And then you can gift that policy to your employee at retirement. So it's a nice way to build cash value, tax deferred, and it gives liquidity to the people that are left after something happens. The buy-sell agreements are very important. If you go into partnership with a brother, a sibling, a spouse, or just friends, if you go into partnership with somebody and even if you're 50-50 owner or 80-20 owner, and something happens to that partner, you really need a buy-sell agreement, which is a legal contract. And inside that buy-sell agreement, insurance is purchased to protect the other partner in the event of a premature death, that we're able to buy out that partner's portion of equity in that business, and then the other owner that's remaining can continue on the business without suffering a financial loss. So these are really important conversations to have. We do this more on the financial side of a business policy versus the liability aspect of it. Okay, next slide. Partnership life. So we kind of touched upon that with the buy-sell agreements. So you're in my world, my theory is you need 3 really good partners in your business. You need a great CPA, you need a great attorney, and you need a great insurance advisor. Those 3 key people, plus the business owner, should make all the decisions that are necessary to be a healthy, profitable business. You need all of us cumulatively to work on your insurance or work on your business to make you successful. So partnership life is just one of those things that we would work with an attorney on and an accountant on setting those things up. Okay, so we're getting to the basic type of insurance policy that's needed, general liability. This word gets thrown around a lot when somebody's opening a business. Everybody knows they need liability insurance. So it covers your basic injuries. Somebody's on your property, they get stuck, they get hurt, they now have a medical bill, you're responsible for it. Let's say somebody slipped on a wet floor at your facility and they broke their elbow. All those bills are covered under general liability. So it covers not only general liability as far as a slip and fall, but it could be contractual liability, personal and advertising injury, and also your general liability. There's some differences inside general liability. There's different types, there's subcategories of general liability. So there's your personal and advertising injury, there's product liability, and then there's premises liability. Sometimes you won't be able to get product liability, depends. Sometimes it comes included, sometimes if you're selling a product, like you're manufacturing soaps, you need product liability. And so that coverage is additional cost. Premises liability was the example that I shared earlier, where somebody just fell on a wet floor, you were negligent, they tripped on something that was unstable, and an injury happened. So that's your premise liability. Your product liability is if you make a product, you serve a product, you ship a product. So that's called product liability. Your lease will also dictate what other coverages that the landlord requires. So you'll want to read the lease with your attorney, and you may need to negotiate some of the lease verbiage. So know that that's a negotiable item in your policy, in your lease, because it's very standard language. What most landlords use in their lease requirement is pretty standard. So I'll see a $5 million requirement on a flower shop, and perhaps that's something that can be negotiated to 3 million, or you discuss that with the attorney on what's appropriate and reasonable for your type of operation. An additional insured endorsement. This happens all the time, especially if you are in the contracting business, if you have a landlord, if you are dealing with a vendor. Most people will not do business with somebody unless they provide proof of insurance. It's just simple as that. It's called a certificate of insurance. The city of Chicago requires it. Your landlord will require it. What it is it protects the person that you're entering into that contract with. It protects them that if something happened, let's say you were a caterer and you're coming to my venue. I hired you as a caterer, and you come on site and you're using your information there, or your something hot plate, and it spilled on somebody. Let's use that as an example. And the person that got hurt is suing me because I'm the venue. I'm the one that had the venue. I'm getting sued, but I then pass that risk. If I'm the additional insured on your policy, the caterer's policy, then I can be represented by the caterer's insurance by listing my company as an additional insured. So be mindful that a lot of vendors will ask to get a copy of your insurance listed as an additional insured. Some companies are no charge to add an additional insured. Others I've seen up to $100 to be added as an additional insured. if you're doing a lot of contracting work, like you're an electrician and you're going from one village to another, and all those villages want to be an additional insured, you may want to ask for what's called a blanket additional insured. That means if I do one additional insured or 100 additional insureds, I pay one flat fee, and then I've got that coverage. I don't have to pay for it a la carte per additional insured. So again, discuss with your insurance professional as to what the best product and coverage that you need, so you don't spend money unnecessarily. Okay, professional liability. So this is also known as errors and omissions. It's shortened for E&O. Professional liability is used for when you're providing a service, not so much a product. It's advice-based service. So your tax accountant, your insurance professional, a realtor, we're giving advice and we're working on your behalf. If we make an error, we make a mistake, or we forgot to do something, and now you're suffering a loss from that, that's what professional liability protects you against. So not everybody needs a professional liability policy, but if you're in the service industry, you likely would need that as a requirement, whether you're working at a home-based business or you're working for somebody else. That professional liability is, you can't run a business and have that kind of risk, because mistakes happen and you don't want to be misrepresented. So it's failing to perform a part which resulted in a financial loss to our customer. Crime insurance. So crime insurance is a benefit that the employer receives on their policy. It's an option. It protects employee to employer. So if my employee steals from me and they steal money, and I'm sued, or I'm missing money, that's considered theft, right? Theft inside the premises. We know it was an employee, so it's not covered under my property coverage. It's covered under this coverage when it's an employee stealing from the employer inside the premises. Credit card usage, something like that, where the employee is causing damage to the employer. This is the coverage that you would buy. Another term for it is called fidelity coverage. So those are the two coverages. If you're dealing in a cash business or you're dealing with transactions, you'll definitely want to have crime coverage, not an expensive option to add on. Cyber liability, extremely popular now. It's been out for about 10 or 15 years, but extremely popular now, especially when you're dealing with client data, right? So if you have client data, and if somebody like a company like Home Depot or Target that have been victims of cyber hacks, your little computer is definitely at risk if you don't have the right systems in place. And even if you have the right systems in place, somebody still could be sophisticated enough to hack you and cause damage and harm, financial harm to you. If you have my data and my data has been compromised, now my personal information I could be a victim of identity theft and identity fraud and things like that. So I may have a claim against you as the company that you did not hold my data securely. So if you have coverage for cyber liability, it protects you legally. We pay for the legal defense to restore that person's credit, to settle a claim against you, and things like of that nature. So it's very important to have a cyber policy, and you could buy coverage up to $1 million on cyber insurance. Clearly, the more at risk your business is, the more expensive a cyber policy becomes. So definitely a must add on your general liability product. Okay, now you're getting into property insurance. So things that you're buying that you're going to put into your property, whether it's inventory, chairs, furniture, computers. It's basically all your contents in the business, as well as your inventory that you may sell. So it covers against fire, vandalism, flooding. You have to add extra coverage for flooding. Sometimes we call it backup of sewer if you're on a ground level or basement level and your product gets damaged from sudden backup of water. You want to make sure if that's a key, if that's where your business operates in, that you'll want to have that extra coverage. It doesn't automatically come with a business personal property coverage. Business interruption coverage triggers when you have a claim, and let's say your property was vandalized. Now you have no computers to operate, and now you suffered you lost 3 days of work before you got everything back up and running. We pay for that business interruption coverage. So we pay for those 3 days that your business suffered the loss, plus the vandalized product, if that's the coverage that you have, up to your personal property limit that you purchased. So these are conversations, again, that you're going to have with a professional, and you're going to decide together how much coverage you want to have. Because how much do you want to self-insure, and how much coverage do you want to have if there was a claim that you can't reopen this business again, and you've already put the money in the first time. So you want to make sure you protect your investment by buying the right insurance policy. Small business workers' comp. So we talked about it earlier. It is required by law to have it. I get a ton of questions about who's considered an employee and whatnot, but in the state of Illinois, everybody's your employee, including a 1099 contractor. Even if they're volunteer and they get hurt, they're considered an employee of your business, and you could be liable for that. So it covers the medical bills, the lost wages. Interesting that it covers third-party lawsuits. So I want to explain just a little bit what that means. Let's say that you're an asbestos removal contractor, and you're going in with your hazmat suit on, and you're removing asbestos. And then you come home and you put your clothes in the laundry, and your spouse takes it out and cleans it up for you. Well, she gets sick from the asbestos. So she's not the employee of the contractor. She wasn't anything to do with the situation, but she's now got mold in her lungs, and she's sick, and whatever happens, that's a third party situation that the workers' comp in the state of Illinois protects the business owner against. And interesting about our small workers' comp law is that you cannot file bankruptcy against a workers' comp claim. So you're not protected by a corporate shield, and you're not protected by your LLC. You can't file bankruptcy. If somebody sues you and if they were your employee, you will be paying all of their medical bills one way or another. More information is going to be found on the state of Illinois' website, which is right here, www.iwcc.il.gov. Research it. They're a great resource. You can call them. You can call them with your questions that you have. Some people are exempt from workers' comp. The employee and the officers of the company are exempt from workers' comp. So if you are a one-man band operation, you don't need to carry workers' comp. If you are a one-man band contractor and you want to work for a general contractor, that relationship is going to require you to carry workers' compensation, and then you can exclude yourself. So certain people can be exempt, and certain people have to buy a policy like a contractor just so they can sign off and exclude themselves. Otherwise, you won't get awarded the job because the general contractor requires you to carry insurance. And if you don't, then he's responsible for your medical bills. So nobody wants to have that responsibility. So certain people, again, can be exempt. Consult with myself or consult with your insurance professional to determine if you're an exempt person, or if you have questions about it, you can also call the department. The money that is collected from the fines, if you're caught without workers' compensation and you're required to have it, it's a $500 a day fine, and they can fine you all the way back to when your business was incorporated. So they can go back 3 years and bill you $200,000 a year for all those years, and you will have to pay that. That fund that the Illinois Workers' Compensation Fund collects helps the uninsured people. So it's a fund that goes right back to uninsured workers to help their medical bills, and that's why they've come up with this law. So it's really a serious offense if you don't have it and you're required to carry it. Okay, EPLI, and very important coverage, especially I feel like in the recent 5 years. It covers a lot of situations where an employee has a problem with the employer. So it could cover against wrongful termination. In Illinois, we're an at-will state, so you could fire somebody for any reason. But if you wrongfully terminate somebody for discrimination, or for you harass somebody, or for whatever reason that the employee felt like you violated their rights, this coverage you could be sued for, and this coverage would pay your defense. So you can buy it at a level of $50,000 of defense all the way up to $1 million of defense. It also can cover employee to employee relations. So let's just say a chef and a bartender are having a exchange of words, and one says something to the other or harasses somebody or says something, an inappropriate joke. The employer is still responsible for what happened to those two employees, even though the employer had nothing to do with it. They were not on site. We have, our job as an employer is to provide a healthy working environment. So that EPLI coverage becomes in handy when you're responsible for all these other people. Restaurants are a really big target for EPLI because there's a lot of turnover with employees, and then there's just a lot of higher risk on a restaurant than perhaps a different business where maybe the employer is just them and one other person. But anybody could sue anybody for anything, whether it's right or wrong or fraudulent or not. You still have to pay for the defense. You have to still defend yourself. So that coverage, that can get to be very expensive. So 40% of our EPLI claims are with small businesses. So it's an unknown coverage. I guess people think that they work in a safe environment, but you don't know what other people can do and hurt you unintentionally, hurt you, that you want to make sure that you're protected on. So this is definitely something that I would recommend everybody to have that has employees. Commercial umbrella. So if you're familiar with the term umbrella insurance from maybe your personal policies, umbrella insurance is an extra layer of coverage. So it goes over and it protects over your auto, your home, your maybe a rental property. That's personal umbrella. Commercial umbrella does the same concept. So if you have $1 million of liability insurance and $1 million on your workers' comp and $1 million on your business auto, and you buy another $1 million, then that extra million kind of floats wherever you need that coverage. So what happened when there was in one of the E2, I think it was a nightclub, and there was a lot of fatalities and people shot. That $1 million policy wasn't enough to pay the 20 people that died or whatever happened in that situation. Things like that can happen, that can cause a very serious harm to the business. You then would need that commercial umbrella to go extend over it. And you could buy commercial umbrella, up to 10 million is very common, depending on the type of business operation you run. If you run a $10 million operation, then you probably need a $10 million umbrella. If you run a $200,000 operation, then maybe the $1 million umbrella is sufficient. So it just depends on the type of work you do and if it's necessary. A lot of leases do require at least $1 million on an umbrella. Surety bonds, very common for contractors. Surety bonds basically are a promise from the insurance company that if the contractor does not fulfill their obligation to the vendor, to the client, then you can call the bond and the bond company will pay for that gap or that coverage that the contractor did not fulfill. It's very inexpensive to buy it. They're typically $10,000 bonds. But let's say you paid a roofer $5,000 deposit to put your roof on, and they take your $5,000 and they don't never come back. If you ask for the bond, then you can go after the bond to pay your $5,000. So when you see advertisements of contractors saying licensed, bonded, and insured, that's the bond part. And it's not expensive. They're like $100 for a typical surety bond. Loss control. Loss control is a benefit that's provided by the insurance company, and it's a two-way win-win. It's a win for the insurance company because they get to inspect your property and provide you safety tools, and it's a win for the customer because they get for free somebody that can come in and inspect on behalf of the insurance company and make sure that they are providing a safe work environment. We just talked about all of the types of risk that you have opening a business and how everybody can sue you for something. If somebody came in and helped you prevent a lawsuit, wouldn't that be great? They help you with an employee handbook. They can give you videos on slip and fall preventions. They can teach a class for your employees. So although it may sound like we're being intrusive when we request a loss control survey, but it really is to the customer's best interest, which is the business owner's best interest, to invite that loss control person in with open arms and help prevent a loss. And by having loss control and a good experience, like 3 years of experience in your business, you could then apply for lower insurance rates. If you're a brand new business and you have no experience, your premiums are likely to be higher than if you are a 10-year business owner and you showed us 10 years that you haven't had a claim, you provide a safe work environment, you comply with all the rules of OSHA and things like that. Well, then your insurance premiums are going to go down over time. So it really is a win-win to help keep your costs down. Most importantly, keep a safe work environment, and it helps the insurance companies make profit as well. All right, so liquor license. Liquor license is also another word for dram shop coverage. When do you need liquor insurance? Obviously, when you serve alcohol. If you're hosting a party, and like myself, I had a Christmas party and it was on my property. I had a Christmas party for my staff. I don't have a liquor license, but I did serve alcohol in that situation. It was a Christmas party. My policy, if I have the right insurance policy, extends coverage if one of my employees were overserved and they got in a car accident and hurt somebody, and I'm sued now, my policy will step in as a one-time event, like a host liquor liability. I didn't serve alcohol for it. It's not my business. I didn't charge a fee for it. I just had the party and I entertained somebody. So it goes along the same lines as like what I just explained with the Christmas party. So that's called host liquor. But most people that need dram shop coverage or liquor liability are bars and restaurants. Bartenders can be a subcontracted bartender. They need liquor liability. If you're serving alcohol, you need liquor liability. If you have a restaurant, it's BYOB. If you're opening the cork and you're serving, you provide the glasses, you still need liquor liability because you've served that alcohol. Even though you may have only charged a $5 cork fee, you still need to carry that coverage. So just be mindful again. These are specific to certain business operations, and there's a lot of you on the call right now, so it may or may not pertain to you, but just write notes if it does, and we can talk about it privately. We're a full human resource and benefits company. So outside of all that coverages that we just talked about, which is business insurance, you're also now the HR company. You also have to get your own benefits because now you're a business owner. You don't have corporate benefits like health insurance, disability, life, all these things that are on the screen here. You have to now decide what benefits you need to provide for your family and your employees. So we help people with all of these other areas that are an extension to business insurance. They're important. They're health insurance benefits, their retirement benefits. Who's going to help you during making your retirement goals? So it's nice to have a resource that can be there for you as an extension to commercial insurance. So this is your benefits department. So just keeping that in mind that you're going to wear a lot of hats opening your own business, and maybe your coverage is going to get provided through a spouse. If you have coverage through a spouse, you may not need health insurance. But what about your employees? What about if you get disabled? What if that life insurance that you had at work, now it's gone. So we build a plan that helps protect all of those different situations, and they're very affordable if you find the right plan. So now we're going to stop at this point, and I know there's a lot of questions coming in. So I don't know if the moderator wants to ask the questions or if I can just go ahead and open it up to questions. I think I'm just going to start because we'll just have questions. So here's the first question. I want to operate an after-school program. Can you provide insurance? Yes. So we have, it's considered like in the daycare operation field, but if you're opening up an after-school program, depending on where you're going to be located, is it an at-home business or is it going to be on site at the school? Either way, you're going to need insurance for that, and we can provide that coverage for you. And you'll need some type of general liability coverage and then other coverages depending on what questions I may ask you. Here's a question. What type of insurance should a beauty salon have? A lot of beauty salons, so we know we've got to start with our general liability. You need professional liability, because if you burn my hair on hair dye, I'm going to sue you. So that's professional liability. You're going to need coverage for your inventory. If there's a fire and all your products are gone, you're going to need that personal property coverage. Then you're going to want to know, do your employees, are they 1099 or are they W-2? If they're 1099, you could still provide health insurance. If they're W-2, you need that workers' compensation. If they're 1099, do they have their own professional liability and general liability? And then the workers' comp as well. So remember that 1099 employee, when they're working for you, they're still your employee. So you're going to need a lot of those coverages that we talked about. You also probably run a cash business. You're going to need that crime coverage. So you need a lot of that coverage that we explained, that all of that. A beauty salon would be a typical scenario where you need most of those products that we talked about. When you go and run and pick up product, you might need that hired and non-owned coverage. So we can definitely talk offline for that. How many insurances do we need for a limo business as a small business? And buying all these policies, we're barely going to have money left over. So that's true. People like to say they could be insurance poor. It is true. And limo services, the kind of insurance you need is called livery insurance. And that's because you're going to have people in your car. So it's a commercial product, commercial auto insurance. It's very expensive. But business liability, you may be able to get around if you don't have an office. You definitely need your commercial auto as a start. And then if you have employees, you're going to need workers' compensation. So I know it's expensive to have insurance, but if you want to run an operation in its full effect and you want to run a sound business, you will make more money if you have the right insurance, because when a claim happens, we're not going to put you out of business. We've had a lot of people close their shops down because they didn't have the right insurance at the right time when they needed it, and then they have to close their doors. So that's more devastating than paying a monthly fee to make sure that all these coverages are protected. And if you don't buy the policy that you need, or if you choose not to, then at least you've made a decision, an educated decision to self-insure in a situation like that. Or maybe you won't have that employee use their car because you know better. So we could work together. And what I always tell my clients is that what you start with on business insurance, it has to be affordable. Doesn't mean that you can't grow with that policy. As long as you're educated as to what products are available and you build on that. I was in the same boat as everybody here. If you're a new business 20 years ago, I didn't have the means either, but I knew the base. I bought the most important products. And then I skimped on other things, like, I went without the TV and cable and things like that at home. And I skimped on other things because I knew that this was going to protect me should something unforeseen happen. Let's see if there's any other questions here coming through. Regarding the example of a 1099 contractor driving their own car on an errand for you as the business owner and getting in an accident or hurting somebody, wouldn't their own personal insurance cover that? So that's a great question. So insurance has your personal auto policy has a business exclusion. Every auto policy, personal, whether it's Farmers, State Farm, AAA, they all have an exclusion for business use. Now, what exclusions are there could be different from one policy to another, but I can tell you that if you're driving and you're delivering something for your employee, that company that insures that auto policy, let's say it's auto owners, that company is going to go after that business owner. It's just what's going to happen. Now, how are they going to know that they're covered for the business owner? They do research. Where were you going? They fill out an affidavit. What was happening? If you were not involved in that business, you don't have to worry about it. But if you did that errand, 100%, you're going to get sued as the business owner. So that situation is a very black and white on an insurance contract. If that person has a personal auto policy and did not add business use on their business, that's why there's a coverage called hired and non-owned auto. Another kind of tip that I can give you is if the type of insurance exists, that means that there's an exclusion for it. So on your homeowner's policy, are boats covered if you have your boat in the garage and then there's a fire? you ask yourself, is there a coverage is there boat insurance? The answer is yes. Well, then it's not covered under your homeowners as personal property. If there was a fire, it's not covered. Is there such a thing as lawnmower insurance? No. So then that becomes personal property in your homeowners. So is there such a thing as hired and non-owned auto? Yes. So that's therefore there's an exclusion on the person's auto policy. So that's kind of the tip to give you if the insurance company is going to cover something or not, is if there's a product that the customer should have bought, then that's the expectation that's where that coverage falls under. So that's why it's really scary when you own a business. You want to make sure you have the right policies. The three most important decision makers are lawyer, CPA, and I hope this is not a trick question, Rhonda, and me, your insurance agent. A lawyer, a CPA, and an insurance professional should be your three partners in your business, because the three of us would help you make sure you're protected legally, financially, and in your business operations. Next question, is there a bundle package? It seems like there's a lot of insurance. Yes, the bundle package is called a business owner's policy, short for BOP, B-O-P. When you buy a bundle, like all those coverages can be in a bundled package, you save money doing that as well. So if like that question that we had from the hair salon, we would bundle a business owner's package for that person. So she wouldn't just buy, or he wouldn't just buy a business, they wouldn't just buy liability insurance, they would buy a business owner's package, because that pricing then becomes more affordable. So you can buy that business package for a hair salon for $1,000 a year, minimal coverage in each category. But you can also, I also have clients that have very large salons and they're paying $5,000 for liability. So can be very affordable if you buy the right packages. That was a really good question. Do I need insurance while I'm working at Amazon website selling my products? Yes. You're working for Amazon, you don't sell, and I obviously can't answer back and forth, but if you're working as a contractor for Amazon, you're selling product. Are you touching that product? You might need that product liability. You might be a third party vendor where I'm the distributor. I'm making the connection with Amazon and the product owner. Is that product from China? Am I responsible for that product? Am I relabeling it? So the short answer is probably a yes, but we got to decide at obviously one-on-one if that product does require you to have it. At a minimum, to buy a liability policy for that situation, if you're never touching the product, you're just kind of the rep, the manufacturer's rep, then you may have coverage under the manufacturer, or you might be able to buy just a small policy that's a home-based business type of policy that's $300 or $400 a year, just to protect yourself, even though there may be a chance that maybe you might not be involved with any lawsuit. Even if you were, you would get excused from that lawsuit because you never touched the product, you didn't relabel it and things like that. So I say err on the side of caution, get a small policy that's very inexpensive, and then you know for sure that you've covered your basis on that. Is there a cost for loss control? No, especially with farmers and the companies that we deal with, we don't charge for loss control. That's part of the service that we provide, and it's a free service to you. We may, however, give you recommendations that we want you to do. So it's not just by the way, you might want to, put some rugs on the floor to prevent slips. We might require you to do that. So when we get loss control out, we might see something very serious and require you to put like emergency lighting. You'd be surprised. Some people don't have the right lighting in their facility, and will come out and will require you then as like a code to put emergency lighting up, and that's going to be an expense to do that. But the actual visit is not charged under any of the companies. I don't have a liquor license. Do I need a liquor license if I periodically promote a BYOB for pouring champagne over gelato cup as a late night dessert? If that's a really one-off scenario, you might want to talk to your insurance agent if that's a scenario where you would need it or not need it, because we really look at your website. So how does the website promote it? A lot of times people will say that scenario like, oh, once in a while I'll do this, but then it's like highlighted on their website. And it really looks like that's the thing that they want to attract somebody to come in. Or we don't have dancing, but then on their website, they've got a dance floor. So we really want to look at what your website says and what you're actually doing. we may be like with farmers, I have a conversation with our underwriter, I give them the information. They may or may not just document the file and agree that that's something that you may not need. In this situation, it would really be case by case if the coverage is needed or not. I would not be the person to say you need it or not need it. I would go to my underwriter and make them hold the responsibility to tell me if that situation is needed or not needed based on research that we've done. So great question, but you may want to look into that further and make sure your policy would cover for that situation. How many employees or 1099 contractors do you need to have a workers' comp? One, just one. If you have one 1099 contractor, they could buy their own insurance, or you can buy the insurance under your company and add that 1099 labor on that policy. The cheaper way to do it is if I'm a contractor and I'm hiring 4 or 5 guys, I'm going to tell those guys, spend $1,500, buy your own insurance, and then I don't have to worry about their salary because they can exclude themselves. Otherwise, if that's a painter that I just hired and I paid him 50 grand, my workers' comp bill might be $6,000 for that contractor, or they could pay $1,500 on their own. So it really is a conversation. We look at, run the numbers. How much is it if I insure them, and how much is it if they do go it on their own? And most of my general contractors will have them buy their own. It's cheaper to have them buy their own and opt out of it at that point. But we would do that case by case for your specific need. What insurance does a sole proprietor need? I only offer advice. So we definitely need to know if you're just advice-based and you work from home, you're probably only going to need professional liability. Some homeowners policies, depending on what you're doing at home, may be able to extend some coverage, liability coverage under your homeowners policy, but typically it excludes professional advice. So if you're an accountant and you're working from home, your homeowners isn't going to cover that professional service, that professional advice. So you would just need professional liability, and very inexpensive to run an operation like that. Okay, we've got another question here. Do you need insurance for a home-based consulting business? I'm not going to see clients at home, just doing administrative service consulting. So we have a professional liability for consultants, and you definitely need that. So if you're doing any kind of advice-based services or helping somebody with helping them with a business plan or whatever your business advice is, just by professional liability, that's going to cover you for what you're doing, especially any type of advice. So think of, if I'm giving advice or helping them write things, sometimes people are doing, like, they do marketing events. They're not running the event. They're just getting all the background and from hosting the event for the client. You're going to need professional liability. So we go by category. So what advice are you giving? And then we find the professional liability product for that specific industry. Okay, next question is, I operate an art entertainment business that I'm expanding to Chicago. My paint and sip events will be BYOB. I won't be providing any alcohol, but they will be allowed to bring their own and drink during the events. What insurance will I need in Chicago? The laws are different than in Georgia. Okay, so the city of Chicago will likely require you to have the dram shop coverage. You would need a liability policy for the city of Chicago to cover those events, especially if you're hosting the event not on your space. If you're hosting it in your space, then you need a business owner's policy. And remember that host liquor may come into play if you have the right policy that would cover that host liquor, meaning you're having the event, you're not even serving the alcohol, they could bring their own. It's a big difference if you're not touching the alcohol, you don't provide glasses for them, they're bringing their own, then you're less likely to need that coverage. So again, consult with the city of Chicago for what they need, they're going to require, and also then what kind of insurance does your policy extend? If you have the host liquor, you're in good shape. If the city requires you to carry the dram shop regardless, then you're going to have to buy the dram shop coverage. If the city, you can't get around it if the city requires it. As a nonprofit organization, will no paid staff employees but volunteer, with no paid staff, but with volunteers, what type of insurance do we need? Nonprofits, there's a liability policy for nonprofits. It's called a nonprofit liability policy. So you do need that. The volunteers are covered typically under either a directors and officers policy, or they would still need workers' comp if they're volunteering. So, but think of it like this, a nonprofit the type of work that a volunteer is going to be doing is, let's say it's a lot of clerical work. They're just helping organize the events. It's very low risk. Your insurance policy for workers' comp for, let's say, $100,000 of payroll might only be $400 a year. So we're not talking very expensive to have the right insurance, but you still would need, remember, those volunteers, if they get hurt, they're still considered your employee in the language of the state of Illinois' workers' comp language. And then there's definitely liability coverage that you need to protect the nonprofit. And the board of the nonprofit means directors and officers liability, which we didn't talk about, but that's a coverage you're going to need as well. Let's see what else. Got a lot of good questions. What type of coverage would I need to open and operate a debris removal company? Would I also need to have a surety bond, or can I operate with only a bond? No, you definitely, debris removal, you're going to want to have some kind of commercial auto policy to cover that. Depending on what kind of debris you're removing, hazardous material or non-hazardous, you're going to need some coverage for liability as well. And then who's driving who's driving those companies? You'll need some type of workers' comp. So your commercial auto, your workers' comp, a lot of our commercial auto policies can add the coverage for liability while you're doing that business. And then you'll need workers' comp for those drivers. So those are definitely two things. Bond wouldn't really pertain in your type of situation because you're basically picking up the debris and getting paid for the job on site. So that would not be a situation where a bond would be required. What type of insurance should a startup property management company need in Illinois with 1099s? Based on what you presented, it seems like workers' comp, yes. General liability, yes. Professional liability, yes. Good job. Those are all yeses. Leasing agents driving around showing units, hired and non-owned auto, that's that. Tenants we communicate with is your professional liability. Landlords we're talking to, that's your professional liability. Contractors working on the property as of landlords, you're going to want to make sure those contractors have the right liability and workers' comp to protect you as the management company. The management company would be named as an additional insured on those contractors. So yes, you're a very good listener, Dan. You needed all those coverages that you need to start that startup company, property management company, and we can help you get a pricing for all of that. That's all type of a package. Is general liability adequate for children's play space? Yes. Are you serving food at the play space? What are the hours of operation? What are the ages of the kids? How many kids? Then we look at your licensing. So the cost of that general liability depends on all those questions that I just asked. So yes, it's adequate, but are you going to have assistance? They're going to need workers' compensation. Do you need more than $1 million, depending on what kind of play space? If you're taking these kids for, to swim class and they're in the pool, super high risk, it's going to get very expensive, but it still falls under that general liability. Are you driving the kids around? Then you need the commercial auto. So it's really, it depends on, I have a ton of questions whenever it's not a yes and no answer to that. So sorry, that's gonna have to be offline. What type of insurance does a restaurant need to have if they serve food infused with cannabis? Okay, so that's interesting. Food infused cannabis, I wanna know where you're located. The certain insurance companies are just not going to write that type of policy. So your type of insurance is still all the same. It's what insurance company is going to take your risk and how much are we going to charge for that. So it's not that you need different insurance. It's that, like with farmers, we don't do anything with cannabis at all. We're just scared of it. Our company just doesn't. So we are hard no. So then we have another insurance company called USLI. They'll write an insurance policy like that, but the premiums are a lot more expensive. So if we can get it with the preferred company, obviously that's the way to go. But a company like Farmers, we just say, no, we don't want to do it. We don't want to do your operation, but it doesn't mean you need different insurance. You just need all of the same operations that we talked about. It's just finding the insurance company with the right price. So we operate as a broker. So Farmers can't write something. Then I have a whole world of brokers that I deal with that we find the right product for you. So then we shop it out. So that's how you just basically need an insurance agent to find you the company that's going to give you the best deal. Not that you need different insurance. What insurances are needed for professional occupational therapist outside of malpractice insurance? The therapist works from home and will travel to some clients' homes. So they need workers' compensation, obviously the malpractice. And if they're traveling, if the professional therapist is traveling to somebody's home, you're going to still need that general liability. So that's your base. You add professional liability to that, and then you add workers' comp. If the therapist is the only employee of their small business, then they can waive themselves off of workers' comp. And if they're not worried about their laptop or computer, if you have inventory or anything else that you're going to be served, like having on site, then you would need business property. But your laptop is probably the only thing that you're gonna need, and probably would self-insure on that. I intend to sell a food product primarily at farmers markets, pop-up events, and e-commerce. What are the main insurance requirements? So all your farmers markets are going to require that general liability coverage and product liability. So that's what you would need. And then if you have a pop-up event that does have inventory there, you'll want to have some inventory coverage for theft and fire. But as far as the vendor is concerned, when you do your pop-up, they're going to want your general liability, and they're going to want product liability, because if you're serving, if you're selling canned jelly and somebody gets sick, remember, everybody gets sued when somebody gets sick. So they're suing the person that labeled the jelly. They're suing the venue that hosted the farmers market, the city of Chicago. All those people all need that same type of coverage for your event. And with that, I don't see any other questions. I'm not sure if anything else wants to pop up. These were really, really great questions. You were very engaged in the conversation that I had, so I really appreciate that. And I hope this clarifies a little bit more of that insurance. It's a lot more broader than people think, and a lot of times you call an insurance company and they aren't asking you the questions that they're supposed to ask you. So I would encourage you to not ask for a resume, but ask them what their experience is. I've had clients ask me for, can you give me five referrals that I can call and see how your business is? Look at the Google reviews, look at how long they've been in business. Are they specialized in business insurance, or do they just do auto? Research that, because you really do need us at the most vulnerable times of your business. You're going to need those three people, right? The attorney, the accountant, and the insurance person. So really take your time and interview those people to make sure that relationship is sound. I don't do any soliciting. We're extremely busy, but if you need me, this is my information. You can reach out to me and set an appointment. I'd be happy to. We don't charge for consulting. I'll give you my advice. I'll help you if I can. And we're local, and we've been here for 26 years. So I've been doing this for the city of Chicago for over 10 years now, and I really enjoy it. This is my favorite part of my job, is educating new businesses and helping people be successful. So thank you for listening, and thank you for your time. With that, I will hand it over back to the presenter. I don't know who's on the call.
Thank you, Sandra, so much for today's presentation. I hope everyone got what they needed out of it. To learn about our upcoming webinars, please send an email to chicago.gov/business education. Again, that's chicago.gov/business education. Thank you again, Sandra, and have a great weekend, everyone. What's this right here? Yeah.